Welcome back to Truth to Tell. I'm Michelle Ali-Marati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll.
And we're
And
back.
although some state legislatures, 12 this year to be exact, have either affirmatively rejected or allowed to die bills that legalize even the medical use of cannabis, which is the official name of marijuana, last fall 3 state electorates voted not only to decriminalize marijuana, a couple of them passed initiatives that a referenda legalizing its regularized and regulated
Recreational. That's the word we're looking for.
Recreational use, yes. Well, Montana and Massachusetts passed medical marijuana reform initiatives, and Colorado and Washington legalized personal use of marijuana outright for those 21 and over.
And Minnesota hasn't gone anywhere near that far yet, but bills to authorize medical marijuana in Minnesota were introduced in both houses this last session. That would be Senate File 1641 and House File 1818. Is that right?
1818.
It
yes,
is 1818?
right?
Oh, okay, I thought it was 1814.
I believe so. The House file is 1818. Yeah, it's an early introduction.
All right, I should never doubt you, Andy. Senate File 1641 and House File 1818, if you want to look up that legislation in both of the houses, failed to exit their respective Health and Human Services committees. Is that what we're going to
Health and Human Services
Yep.
committees, yeah. Which is the first committee that they were referred to, and they're still there.
Yeah, but Minnesota operates on a biennial legislative system, meaning the bills won't die even after adjourning in the first year of the 2-session biennium without passage. So this summer is sort of being used to rally up support, as I understand it.
Well, certainly that's what these people will talk about, I'm quite certain.
Yeah.
And but at the moment, we are hopefully, at the moment, as we say, Minnesota ranks the personal possession or sale of less than 1.5 ounces or 42.5 grams of marijuana. 42.5 grams sounds like a lot, but 1.5 ounces doesn't. Now, are we avoirdupois around here or not? Okay. They call it a misdemeanor for calling for a maximum of $200 penalty, but they often don't even enforce that. They're often just sort of discharged if they're a first offender. Anything more than that amount and possession and sales become felonies and penalties in Minnesota, depending on the quantity and where you've bought and or sold it, can go through the roof. Anywhere from 5 years and $5,000 to get this. For marijuana, 30 years and $1 million as a fine. Ridiculous.
And this is a hot topic in many circles. Give us your questions and comments today. I'm sure you have many of them. Whether or not you have
actually smoked the stuff.
Yeah, whether or not you've actually smoked it, which I think a lot of polls show that most people will willingly admit that they have. Like, not when I say most, a majority of people will willingly admit that they have. We want to hear your stories. What do you think? I've actually, I've heard from some people that don't think it should be legalized. I've heard from some people that think that, it does have some medical value. I've heard some people say they don't think it has medical value. And I'm sure that you have a thought about it yourself. So give us a call at 612-341-0980. 612-341-0980 is the number to call to get your questions and comments live on the air with us today. You can also tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll. I'll also be checking the hashtag Truth to Tell. So you can do hashtag Truth to Tell or tweet us directly at TTT Andy Driscoll or post your questions and comments on Facebook. We don't discriminate on social networks.
Truth to Tell.
But I can
Facebook
only monitor
page.
so many at once. So just Facebook.
You're doing
and
all the
Twitter.
work. Yeah. Well, we thought it worthwhile to come back to the subject after last fall's elections and this last Minnesota legislative session's introduction of measures to legalize. I don't suppose it's the very first time that this has happened, but to legalize medical marijuana. And this time to bring one of the suffering witnesses from that session's testimony to talk about his experience as well. Time to quiz the sponsoring state senator, advocates, and the patient over the momentum behind medical marijuana, as well as the hopes for decriminalization of marijuana in Minnesota.
And Scott Dibble, who is here with us today, is that state senator. He authored Senate File 1641, the bill authorizing the legalization of medical marijuana in Minnesota, which remains for the moment in the Health and Human Services committees of both houses. Senator Dibble, I had to trip over that. I'm sure a lot of people do. It's early. Senator Dibble chairs the Senate Transportation and Public Safety Committee and the Transportation and Public Safety Division of the Finance Committee. And let us not forget that Senator Dibble was the Senate author of the law allowing same-sex marriage in Minnesota. So congratulations on that recent victory.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble, welcome to Truth to Tell.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Andy. Happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to delighted to have you. That was a fantastic year, wasn't it?
It was quite a year. I mean, marriage was a big deal, but we did a lot of other stuff too.
And, your own marriage will be legalized in Minnesota.
Correct. Yeah, in August, I'll be legitimately married in Minnesota. Yeah.
But you were married in California, isn't that correct?
Correct. 5 years ago in 2008, when there was that little window that has now reopened as of a few days ago.
Yeah, that's just
We
delightful.
want to have a whole show about that right now, too.
Yeah, we ought to talk about more about that.
Post-Supreme Court decision.
All right.
Oh, yeah. We'll
have you back.
We'll bring you back then
Yeah.
for that. Anyway, Curtis Hanna's back with us. Hi, Kurt. He's now he's no longer executive director. Now he is a board member and a co-founder of Minnesota Chapter of NORML, which is the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws, and that's the last time we're going to call it that. NORML, N-O-R-M-L is how it's spelled. Kurt, glad to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay.
And you guys retweeted us this morning. I saw that.
Yes.
Thank you. And we also have with us Katie
Rucky.
Rucky?
Yeah.
All right. Katie Rucky. She is the editorial assistant and staff writer for the relatively new online news operation based in Minneapolis, Mint Press News, where she specializes in health, criminal justice, education, whistleblowers, and watchdog investigations. She is a force to be reckoned with, apparently.
Of course.
Katie Rucky, welcome to Truth to
Thank
Tell.
you. Good morning.
She also writes a lot about marijuana, which is why she's here.
Go figure.
Yeah, I didn't know they had somebody assigned directly to write about marijuana. I want to know where you toke up, kid. Okay. No. Finally, Patrick
We're doing that
McClellan.
right now. No, just kidding.
Finally, Patrick McClellan is a Burnsville resident who suffers from mitochondrial myopathy,
That's correct.
a rare genetic muscular disorder that causes severe painful spasms. And I've known other people with this myopathy, but he's found more relief, he has said publicly, in using marijuana than in any other drug, and he testified at the legislature on this subject. Mr. McClellan, welcome to TTT.
Thank you very much for having me.
And remember, we want to hear from you as well. You're always welcome to be another guest on our show. So you can give us a call with your questions and comments about marijuana use in Minnesota, be it medical or recreational or anything else. You can give us a call at 612-341-0980, 612-341-0980 to get your questions and comments live on the air, or tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll, or post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. We'll be monitoring that throughout the hour.
And we have to remind people that we are on video at this time as well. We keep sort of forgetting to tell them that Craig
Well, we're not live streaming,
is
though,
back.
currently.
We're not live streaming today because live stream is down apparently. But
For us,
we
anyway.
are videotaping this show. So when it's posted later on YouTube and our website, you'll be able to watch that whole thing and perhaps snitches of it, snippets of it, as you see fit. And in any event, do check us out on the video side. Now, Senator Dibble, whatever gave you the idea that Minnesota might be ready to pass a law allowing medical use of marijuana, let alone recreational use, especially when the governor has stated flatly that if he'll oppose such a law if law enforcement doesn't support it. How about that?
Well, thanks. That's a great question. Actually, little known fact perhaps, but we have passed this bill before and gotten it to the governor's desk. We did that a couple of years ago and got it to Governor Pawlenty's desk, and
He vetoed it.
and he vetoed it.
Thank you very much. Yes, for enlightening us on
Right.
that.
So, you don't really jump into this business without a sense of optimism. And they also say politics is the art of the possible. And, when something's the right thing to do, you just, and there's an idea, there's a problem, a solution to the problem. What we do in this work is we just try to find those solutions. And so.
And if the votes are there.
Right. And, the legislative process is one of discussion and debate and deliberation, and that also takes into account larger groups of stakeholders, coalitions, the executive branch, folks who agree with you and folks who disagree with you. So we put together a proposal, and I think we're going to take a lot of time to have this larger public discussion and try to create a larger space, larger political space in which we can be successful in passing this. The fact of the matter is that there's a lot of folks, and we're going to hear from some, I'm sure, today, as well as one of our guests, who are suffering. And it's silly when we have something that can help folks. I have that experience in my own life with good friends. I come out of the HIV activism movement. That was how I came into politics, and I can tell you about the benefits that this has for a lot of folks. And to deny them that, I think, is unconscionable.
Do you have you encountered a lot of your friends in Minneapolis, where you represent your constituents, using this stuff recreationally? Do you? I mean, I know since it's illegal, I don't want to, but you must know if it's being used.
It's not. I mean, I'll admit, at one time in my life, it's a long time since past, and so I don't run in those circles, but. Sure. Yeah, I'm aware of folks.
You are. I mean, it's very interesting to me, and maybe let's widen this conversation now a little bit to start including people. But it is interesting to me in part that in order to use it, you have to smoke it most of the time. Isn't that right, Kurt Hanna?
Well, actually, just like any sort of herb, there's a multiple sorts of ways that one can use it. Actually, topically through a lotion. One of the most effective ways that I've heard for medical patients, especially to use it, is to actually just blend it up in a juice and mix it with, carrot juice or apple juice. You can actually get a component called THCA, which is the THC acid, which is a cannabinoid that goes away when you burn it.
A cannabinoid.
Correct. It's one of the principal active ingredients in cannabis that interacts with our bodies.
I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we non-smokers, we people who've given up that terrible habit, don't have to inhale it anymore. Is that right?
Correct. You actually can take the juice form, which is the raw form, and get a lot of the medical benefits without any sort of high effect at all, actually. And also there's tinctures, which can be sublingually. You can put them under your tongue and absorb it through your mouth lining. You can also actually heat up the medical marijuana and put it into some sort of high-fat soluble substance, like brownies is a common example.
It's like butter.
I remember the brownie years.
Correct.
That's when I was not introduced myself right to the brownie thing. I smoked marijuana probably 45 years ago, and it just wasn't my drug of choice at the time. But most people were smoking it then just to get high, and not to, it was recreational strictly.
And the one other use is...
But I did find this.
Yeah.
No hangover.
It's true.
Yeah, no hangover, and I had the munchies. Yeah. I must have scarfed down 2 bags of potato chips or something in a very short time.
And the one other way to use it currently available is vaporizing, where you actually don't inhale any sort of smoke. It's simply vapor that you're breathing into your lungs. It's a lot healthier way to use.
Well, how do they do that?
You can simply heat it up to a specific temperature in an electronic heating device, and only the certain components that you desire to have burned will burn at that certain temperature.
Okay, so Patrick McClellan, is that the way you sort of found, or do you actually smoke it?
Well, no, I actually use the vaporizer.
You do?
Okay. I did start using the brownies, but for me, I'm using it to prevent severe attacks of muscle spasms. I usually get warning, which is fasciculations or the muscle contractions, about an hour to 30 minutes prior to
In your
an
fingers?
attack.
Is that what you?
It could be really anywhere. It can be all over the body. The muscles will start to pulsate as to where the attack is going to begin.
Really?
So then I'll know, and that's about an hour to 30 minutes prior to the attack. And then I had started with brownies, but it takes longer for that to take effect than what a vaporizer does. A vaporizer just takes a very small amount of cannabis, it heats it, and only the things that you need are what you get. You're not inhaling any smoke.
But you're essentially doing this illegally, are you?
Correct. Yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid. We're
Yeah.
trying to get to the point where patients can actually have a safe place to access it without entering the black market, and to actually know what the strains are, because there actually are different strains for different things. For example, an indica will provide the muscle relaxants and the antispasms that I need.
And so the way that you package the THC has a lot of effect on how it can help you medically, is what I'm sort of gathering from all this. Would you guys?
The type of
agree?
strain, and
Yeah.
then how you're entering into your system. And my doctors have been aware of it from when I began doing it. I've only been doing this for about a year and a half. When I was, back in the day when I was young, I was a recreational smoker, but I quit about 15 years ago because I don't enjoy the high. That's the good thing about the vaporizer, is I can use such a small amount that I can get the effect that I need to relax the muscles without the high, because I do not enjoy the high. So
That's very interesting.
It makes a really big difference, and the amount I used as a recreational smoker that would last a week now is enough for me medically to last me 2 months. So I'm using a very small amount. But that's just me personally. I'm not speaking for what that would do for other people, because medications are different for
Yeah,
different
and what you're saying here, which I find is interesting, you're saying you just need a small amount. And I was reading up on in the bill the details of the legislation right now. It says something about having up to, what is it, like 2.5 ounces that you can have. So
That's
that
correct,
would,
yeah.
in
That
your
would sort of
case, that would
double
last
or
you
a
a really
little more
long
than
time.
double?
A
wouldn't it?
year,
Yeah.
probably.
It'd be
I mean,
like a
at
year's
least.
supply. But you're allowed to have that on you at one time legally.
But that, like I say, that's just for me. I mean, different patients would have different needs.
Yeah.
And I have the medications that I wear around my neck that are used, that I've been given prior to these massive attacks to try that. It's 2 medications. One of the medication actually enhances other symptoms of the disease, and the other medication the FDA has specifically said not to use for my specific purpose the way I do it, because it could be fatal.
Talk about just a little bit, and then we'll get back to the policy side of this thing. The mitochondrial myopathy business. What is that? Is that it's a rare condition, it says here, but
Correct.
there have to be more common conditions that call for possible use of marijuana or THC.
For me, it's the symptoms, because the symptoms of my disease, such as neuropathic pain and the massive muscle spasms,
Yeah.
would be the same for patients with other similar muscular dystrophy diseases or multiple sclerosis, ALS. There's a lot of diseases that have those effects on the muscles.
So that's sort of the family of diseases that mitochondrial myopathy is in?
It's in muscular dystrophy. It's considered a form of muscular
Oh,
dystrophy.
it is.
Yes.
I see. All right.
Muscular dystrophy is a word that has a lot of different diseases within it.
Okay.
And
all right.
mitochondrial myopathy is one of the diseases covered in the muscular dystrophy.
Yeah, I've had some friends who actually got muscular dystrophy late in life, which really
Such as
astounded
myself.
me. Yeah. And I kept wondering, how do you get these things?
My mitochondrial disease is inherited. You have 2 types of DNA. You have nuclear DNA and mitochondrial DNA. And I have a mitochondrial DNA defect that I would have been passed from my mother, that is then carried in me, and it's gone off in me to create the mitochondrial problems. Mitochondrion is what produces energy for the cells.
Yes, right. I remember that part in biology.
Yeah, it's the biology part of it. But that's what it takes, the complex sugars and the oxygen, and it produces power. And my mitochondria only produce 1/3 of the power needed for my nerves and muscles. So it is a progressive degenerative neuromuscular disease. I was diagnosed about 20-some years ago, and I did quite well. I was a chef for about 25 years.
Really?
I am no longer able to do that because of the loss of control of my legs. I can walk for short distances, but as far as any meticulous handwork and standing and moving around, that's all.
Well, that's too bad because good chefs are rare.
Correct. And I loved it. I loved every minute of my career.
Katie
You just
Rucki.
need a good sous chef, perhaps.
Yes, that's right.
Katie Rucki, let's bring you in this discussion a little bit because your coverage, I would assume, although your news service, Mint
Yep, Mint Press News.
Mint Press News,
Yes.
which is interesting. It has press in it, but there's no press involved. It's strictly online, right?
Yeah, we're online, but moving forward in the future, we're all going to be online probably.
Oh yeah, no, I know
Yeah.
that's happening, but it's interesting to call it press. Now, if you've been covering this topic there, would you talk a little bit about what you've encountered in the way of if you're doing reporting, you're digging around on both sides of the issue, I would think. What is the resistance?
This is honestly one of the most fascinating political stories I've ever covered. And there are huge lobbies in favor of legalizing, but there are also huge lobbies against it. For medical marijuana, you're going to get the prison groups that are against it. Private prison industry is huge. In Indiana, the governor.
Why would that be? Why would they oppose it?
Because they want more people to go to jail, right?
There are a ton of people in jail for minor marijuana offenses. And, yeah, it's shocking.
You mean, wait, isn't the point of corrections now to actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Katie.
No, go ahead.
But we've got a state senator in the room. Isn't the point of a corrections at least some form of rehab? It's not, do they really lobby for prisoners?
Well, we could get into another show.
We will do that too because we have done shows on this.
Yeah, this is all about the privatization of public services and putting the profit motive in front of public policy imperatives and the public good. And the private prison industry, which thankfully we've kept out of Minnesota, thanks a lot to my predecessor Alan Spear, by the way. Has really driven a lot.
And no thanks to Randy Kelly, who was his colleague.
Right. It was that was a blood and guts battle before I got to the legislature. And we're of course familiar with the American Legislative Exchange Council, and these private prison groups are very
ALEC. Everybody knows it as ALEC.
Very, very deeply involved in that organization, driving a lot of these what they call policy models, these model legislative proposals that then these Republican legislators take back to their state legislatures and run as bill proposals and pass them in many cases. These are all corporate written, profit-driven legislation that completely upends the notion of public good and drives public resources into things that we don't want.
And the politics of this goes back even further. I'm sure you are aware of this as well too, Katie, that politics of this goes back like a century now, pretty much, in the U.S. at least, of being purely political and not really having any bearing on the medical ramifications or health ramifications of it. It seems to me that it kind of started out as almost a racist policy, or the policy was driven by some racist views about degradation of society based on stereotypes of certain groups of immigrants that were coming in. I mean, would you agree on that? Like, it seems like there was a lot of stereotypes coming from this idea of Chinese immigrants being hooked on opium all the time and not being very productive, and then there was also some waves of people trying to pass policy against Mexican immigrants and things like that. Does anybody want to add to that? I mean, it seems like we've been dealing with a long, long history of this.
I haven't found that.
Yeah.
Hemp is something, it's similar to marijuana, but the fight against hemp goes back to the 1930s, and then if you look at it, it was, the big steel industry that was against hemp, and a lot of people don't know that the first Model T was actually made using almost 100% hemp.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's,
Henry Ford.
yeah, hemp
Good
was
for you.
used to make clothing, to build homes.
Yes, right.
But most recently, when you're talking about just marijuana, I mean, we do blame minorities a lot now, which is probably why minorities are targeted more than white people.
But the Reefer
See, I would
Madness
think
thing,
that
that
goes
wasn't
back-
directed entirely at people of color, was it, Scott?
Well,
Remember Reefer Madness?
Yeah. Reefer Madness is one of those educational films that kids got in school. I actually was never exposed to it. It's a little bit before my time, but
Yeah.
but
Oh, come on. You're
did-
getting gray in the beard.
And that's what I'm getting into with Reefer Madness, is this idea of people were sort of attributing the effects of other sort of harder drugs to marijuana and talking about like copious opium use and stuff like that, and attributing that to copious marijuana use, and saying that it was going to lead to the degradation of society, and sort of blaming a lot of immigrants that were coming
see,
in. Curtis, do you
wants to
want
jump in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kurt, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I would say that a lot of the reefer madness
This is Curtis Hanna.
a lot of the reefer madness that came about in the 1930s in our country actually was imported from Mexico, where reefer madness actually kind of originated. But I would say that throughout cannabis prohibition and just most substance prohibition in general, including alcohol, there has always been certain minority groups that are specifically targeted more than others. And just recently, the ACLU came out with a report saying that in Minnesota, if you're African American, you're 8 times as likely to get arrested for marijuana than if you're Caucasian. So seems to be a trend.
Yeah, and I think nationally it's about the same. It's something
Well,
like
and that's
6
true of
times as
almost
likely.
every crime, isn't it, Scott? I mean, that's your research certainly has to point that out, that people of color are being arrested at some incredible rate beyond normal.
Well, you see these sort of racial disparities in all kinds of application of public policy. I mean, punitive measures in our public schools, and certainly folks' ability to exit the correction system and find work.
Yes.
People just, there's still kind of an underlayer of disparate treatment that's going on in our society that we need to address.
And that disparate business is almost always directed, it seems, or at least African Americans and Latinos in this country.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we
All
need
right,
to we
well,
need
if
to
you-
take a break, but when
Yep.
we come back, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the specifics of this bill that's being proposed here in Minnesota, and talking about, how this is just medical. So what are the implications of that as we talk about arrests pertaining to marijuana and things like that?
Yeah, and I like more about that
Yeah.
resistance factor, the corporate resistance factor,
Yeah.
too.
Do
Okay,
those
if you've
two
just
relate?
joined us,
Yeah.
we are talking with 3 advocates for a range of uses, medical and recreational, and a reporter. I don't want to put you in the advocate
Yeah, please don't.
right now, but our guests are State Senator Scott Dibble, author of the latest attempt at legalizing marijuana for medical use, which is not quite yet passed. It's still in the Health and Human Services Committee, which means that
It's not
the
not
public can now get involved in this. Minnesota NORML board member, and I still have it down here as executive director here, Minnesota NORML board member and co-founder, Kurt Hanna. And it was around the time you co-founded this chapter that you were on this show, right in January of last year or something like that.
I think that was our 1-year anniversary.
1-year
actually.
anniversary, okay. All right, and it's Mint Press News investigative reporter Katie Ruckey, and mitochondrial myopathy sufferer Patrick McClellan, who's finding more spasm relief in marijuana than any other treatment. So,
you can also join the conversation today. Give us your questions and comments. And I actually do have a comment to get back to when we come back.
Oh, good.
That from someone that called in. The number to call is 612-341-0980, 612-341-0980. Or you can tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll or hashtag Truth to Tell, or post your questions and comments on Facebook. So that's 3 different ways that you can join the conversation today. And stay with us. Truth to Tell will be right back. And welcome back to Truth to Tell. I'm Michelle Ali Murati.
and I'm Andy Driscoll, and we're talking with Senator Scott Dibble, State Senator Scott Dibble to be sure, Minnesota NORML board member and co-founder, Kurt Hanna, Mint Press News investigative reporter Katie Rucky, and mitochondrial myopathy sufferer Patrick McClellan. Burnsville residents. We like suburban people here every so often. We're pretty city-oriented normally here. And we'll catch it up in a moment. But next week, all sorts of exciting stuff. First, we'll talk about some amazing community-based work in the Phillips neighborhood, which is going on regarding from the Alley newspaper's Backyard Initiative. A little movement spawning big things among various Phillips subgroups, chats, as they call them, citizen health action teams, approaching the family as a healthy unit, physically, mentally, spiritually, building cooperative models around the concept of rebirthing communities, such as the role of community gardening, family financial stability and self-sufficiency, artistic expressions for all manner of ethnic and socioeconomic groups, including, for example, the Somali diaspora there. We'll talk with some of those folks immersed in the creation and continuation of the Alley's Backyard Initiative and chats and why they believe they may be the wave of the urban future. And that's right next week here on Truth to Tell. Then our next live Community Connections Forum on youth empowerment will take place the following Wednesday night, July 10th. And this is all Michelle's.
Yes, that will be the Twin Cities Youth Empowerment Forum, brought to you by Truth to Tell Community Connections, and that is next Wednesday, July 10th at 6:30 p.m. at Avalon School, which is on University, or just off University, I should say, and Raymond. It's kind of tucked away back behind University and Raymond, so it's one of those ones you probably want to throw into your GPS if you have one. Mm-hmm. The actual address is 700 Glendale Street in St. Paul.
Glendale's just a block west of Raymond, mm-hmm. and this is also a block and a half south of University, so yeah. You can actually get there fairly easily.
And the reason that you should get there and find us is because we will be talking about how to empower our youth in the Twin Cities. Most importantly, our youth will be talking about how to empower themselves. We'll be asking questions like, what does it mean to you to be successful? What are the things that you need to achieve that success? Who are people that you look up to, and how could you, what would need to happen for you to be more like those people? And these youth will answer these questions for themselves, as well as adults that are there will be there to observe and support these youth as they have these conversations. And we're going to try to bring about some goals for these youth in their communities to help themselves and to help the rest of their community.
And Avalon's a pretty good place to go.
Yeah, and
my grandson will be going there this fall. It's project-oriented, not quite Montessori type outfit, yeah. But it does.
It's a charter school.
But it's a charter school in St. Paul, so it's a public school.
And they're very much about applied learning.
Yeah, and you walk in the door and you can just see the kids have put everything on the walls, and they've just, they're out to promote their school. That's obvious.
Yeah.
It's a great place.
It's a great space. If you yourself are a young person, or you've got some special young people in your life, or you're just really interested in the betterment of young people in our communities here in the Twin Cities, please come next Wednesday, July 10th at 6:30. We have a Facebook event on our Facebook page, so you can RSVP there. So we know how many root beer floats to buy. We will have root beer floats per the request of some of our youth organizers that are helping me put this together. We're also working with some folks from Youth Prize and some folks from the the Center for Citizenship and Democracy. Used to be part of the Humphrey Schools, now at Augsburg College. And we are also working with St. Paul Parks and Rec Youth Job Corps Division and the Step Up program to put this together. So we've got some great partners. Please, like I said, spread the word, and you can always contact me, Michelle, at michelle.alimarati@gmail.com to get more information. I have a press release and a flyer and all that fun stuff. So
That's great.
join us.
Okay, and I'll be taking a short break after next week's chat conversation. Is that redundant? And right now, back to this conversation about the uses and legality of marijuana. 612-341-0980 is the number to call. 612-341-0980. Give us a buzz. Tell us about your experience with marijuana. You remain very kind of. You have a phone call? Oh,
We
good.
do, yeah.
All right.
We have Anita from Minneapolis.
Well,
on
let's
the
put
line.
Anita on the phone.
Hi,
Hello, Anita.
Hi. I want to know how can we just go for straight up legalization? Because when I was seeing the paperwork that you have to go through to prove it's not just a simple doctor's note. And
It's
I wonder
not.
if we could just go for just straight up legalize it, please.
Thank you, Anita.
Let's go to NORML for that discussion a little bit. Go ahead, talk about that, and then we'll ask Scott, why aren't they putting it through for recreational use, or why don't we put it on the ballot, or something like that? Go ahead.
Well, I know for a fact that there has been a poll that was done recently that says that 65% of Minnesotans are in favor of medical marijuana. Minnesota NORML believes that prohibition itself is an abysmal failure. However, we do believe that the sick and the dying really should be the first to be able to access cannabis in a safe and reliable way. And really, we have the numbers, and we believe the support to actually get a chunk of prohibition taken care of for the people that are needing it.
Removed, you mean, the prohibition removed. Excuse me, my mic is
correct.
falling apart. In
Yeah,
here.
we really do believe that this is a very viable bill, and we would like to take care of this issue while we still have the ability, and we have a legislature that really is interested in taking on something that's this important.
And what have we learned from other states like Colorado, where they started with medical and then moved forward? I mean, is this a logical progression to do it this way? Is this, and Senator Dibble, you can insert yourself in this conversation too. Is this a first step to just getting our foot in the door to full legalization, or are we trying to just say that, you know, these folks who really have a serious illness and can benefit from this shouldn't have to worry about it being illegal? I mean, we do this with other prescription drugs. You know, why should this just remain a prescription drug? What do we?
Yeah,
We'll start with.
Yeah,
Kurt.
well, I would say that it definitely this is, in our opinion, a first step. But the way that I view it is that we have a large consensus of people, that 2/3 of our state, that agree that this is something that should be tackled now. Maybe I know
medical
for
part of it,
the
yes,
medical
yeah.
part, and
Yeah.
I know for a fact that not every one of those individuals would like to go to the next step. So I say we should have
Not every one of the individuals using it for medical use.
and not all the individuals that would like to see medical marijuana get passed want to see legalization get passed.
Yeah.
And I say when we have the support to fix a certain problem, that we should come together as a whole and identify it and take care of it. And then we can discuss legalization further down the road. But this is what's in front of us right now, and I think that that's
The
what we should
interesting
focus
thing
on.
about legalization overall is that there's certainly some evidence to show that there is nowhere near the problem. There are nowhere near the problems that alcohol and nicotine bring on when you use marijuana, and I find that very interesting that the control, perhaps, and this is a corporate control issue again. Number one, in the medical field, I would think that pharmaceutical companies are bucking up against this bill pretty heavily. And number two, that in the recreational side, you'd have the liquor and industry and all kinds of people on your back. Scott Dibble, talk about that.
Correct. Well, first, let me just say that I'm really, really interested in passing this bill because of my own experience with members of my community, friends, even people I'm related to,
Yes.
who could have very, very well benefited, who suffer needlessly
And we sort
and
of
or are
dis-
forced to be criminals
We
in
sort
order
of-
to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me interrupt for just a second. I'm sorry to do that, but we really did sort of discover during the HIV really bubble crisis that the smoking of marijuana was very relieving and very safe way to take away much of the many of the
a
symptoms.
number of the symptoms,
Yeah.
particularly around wasting, nausea, and some of the muscle spasms and that sort of thing. And it really vexes me. I mean, it's really tragic to think about folks who either went without or were forced to behave in a criminal fashion who otherwise wouldn't. Getting to the subject of full-on legalization for recreational use, you think you've got a rough sled getting this bill passed.
Right.
I said, before my opening statements notwithstanding about the art of the possible, that would be a very, very tall order.
Deep.
For a lot of different reasons.
Just, are you speaking to the current climate, or?
Yeah,
the
political climate. I mean, I'm guessing we could sure pass it on a referendum in a heartbeat, but there's still a lot of public policy issues to take into consideration that we'd have to think about if we passed marijuana just for general recreational use. I agree, nicotine, alcohol, and I also think the overreaction to marijuana use in our state and our country is ridiculous and a huge, huge waste of money. And a fool's errand doesn't solve the problem, despite all of the effort, all the law enforcement, full-on criminal justice, community corrections efforts, haven't begun to address the problems and only created a ton more problems, not the least of which is a huge black market under economy driving a lot of the criminality and a lot of the tragedy that we see in Mexico.
And so, but if you do have all this kind of support then for medical marijuana, what has been keeping it in committee?
Well, the bill itself was introduced late in the session, so it really didn't have an opportunity to be heard. So,
it was late May, sort of, wasn't it? Or early May,
yeah. So it was
May.
a late breaker. Yeah. So it really the process is as it should be.
I see. Okay. I did see where the use of marijuana for pain relief of teens was opposed recently by the Mayo Clinic physicians.
Maybe, Katie, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, did you see that article?
Yeah, the report has not come out yet, but there's a lot of concern from doctors. The American Pediatrics Association has actually come out and said that there is no medicinal value, especially for children, and they're concerned that it's going to impair cognitive development. However, I am working on a story right now about children using medical marijuana, and I've actually had the privilege of talking to parents of children who are using medical marijuana, and again, they're not smoking it, they're taking oils, but it's kind of miraculous when you're listening to these stories. One father, his
These
son...
are children with what sort of disease?
The people I've been talking to, they have Dravet syndrome, which is a severe form of epilepsy. So I was talking to a father. He lives in California, so his son actually qualifies for a medical marijuana program. Mm-hmm. His son was screaming for about 2 months straight, wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating, wasn't really able to function, basically sat in a wheelchair all day and just was in horrible pain, couldn't communicate, couldn't chew his own food. He was on 22 different medications. So his father, told me he himself was thinking about committing suicide. He couldn't watch his son be in any more pain. They had 40 ambulance trips to the hospital. He decided to try giving him some oil. Stopped crying, was able to sleep, was able to eat. His son is now 5. He's been using this oil. He can now chew. He can now talk. He can play on playgrounds. As part of this illness, kids, when they're excited, they have a seizure. When they're hot, they have a seizure. When they're cold, they have a seizure.
Any extreme...
Anything.
Yeah.
This kid would look at a swimming pool, would have a seizure.
Really?
Yeah. Now, he's jumping in pools. He's swimming. He's learning to play on a playground.
And this is all because he's taking some sort of marijuana oil, oil.
Well, should we say just ingesting THC rather than... so it seems like a lot of what you're talking about is that people are picturing a 5-year-old like smoking a joint, right?
And then this father told me that the oil for children is specifically designed that the THC level is so low that there's no way you can get high.
I see.
So that's not
Sure.
even a possibility for these children.
But it does do the pain relief. And have you used oil, Patrick?
No,
Okay.
I've just done the brownies and used the vaporizer.
Okay.
But it's the same idea where, I'm trying to ingest a very small amount of it. So there's THC and then there's CDB. And the CDB, the mixture of the two is kind of giving me the muscle relaxation. So I'm trying to only ingest a very small amount to get to that line because I don't like the side effect of the high.
And we have to wrap up, but just one clarification. What is CDB? Because I think we know.
I think it's cannabinol. There's a large amount of cannabinoids in
Okay.
cannabis, and that's one of them.
Okay.
I mean, there are like a whole range of
There's
different...
a cocktail of a lot of different
really?
properties. Yes.
Okay. So
Interesting.
what are chances of this thing passing next year, do you think?
Extremely high. With Scott behind the wheel, I think that we got.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Not under the influence. though.
No,
No, not-
What do you think, Scott?
I think it's a good possibility. We do have some work to do with the governor, and so
Yeah, the
people
law
that-
enforcement
people-
community is somehow a big trip, isn't it?
Yeah, so we have some work to do, either pulling folks in or overcoming. And if people want to see this pass, they absolutely have to get involved. There is no substitute for grassroots mobilization.
And
This isn't a debating parlor up at the legislature where we all kind of talk to each other in an oak panel room somewhere where no one can see us. This is about the engagement of the folks who elect us. People have got to get involved in
and
this
people
effort.
can connect with your office or with Minnesota NORML to get involved. Or there's some other ways you'd like to mention that people should take action if they want to.
Talking to each other, letters to the editor, talking to their groups and associations, their faith communities, their neighbors, their labor groups. Really creating a larger statewide conversation around this, talking about how important it is,
All right.
and making it mainstream.
And Kurt, what are you gonna be doing some mobilization?
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be working with our sister organization, Minnesotans for Compassionate Care, to really push this issue forward and engage the public and legislators around the state.
And I do know that the Minnesota Nurses Association, the Public Health Association, and a whole variety of medical delivery systems are really in support of this bill rather than, we've talked about who opposes it, but there really is a long list of people who support this thing. So, we must end it there, and I have to thank all of you guys for joining us. State Senator Scott Dibble authored Senate File 1641, the bill legalizing marijuana in medical marijuana in Minnesota, still in the Health and Human Services Committee, which means that next session, after next January 1st, I think it's in February, it's the short session, right?
Correct.
Around February 1st, you'll be able to start testifying. I just keep an eye out for the hearings in that committee.
February 25th, we go in.
Oh, that late?
Yeah.
Oh, February 25th. It really is a short session, folks. You got to sort of pack your lobbying in. Scott also chairs the Senate Transportation and Public Safety Committee. He's often working with Frank Hornstein in the House on transportation issues, so keep an eye out for some of that stuff because you'll have quite a bit of funding for mass transit next year, I suspect.
Oh, that's another huge effort. Fell a little short this year.
I'd
So
have to do a whole series with you,
All
Senator
right.
Dibble.
Awesome.
It looks like we're going to bring Scott in a lot. I hope he'll be available.
Happy to.
Okay.
All right, and then we've also had with us Kurt Hanna, who is NORML's co-founder and is now board member with Minnesota NORML, and he has been in the business of legalizing or fighting for the legalization of marijuana for quite some time. Thank you for joining us today, Kurt.
Yeah, thank you for
Always
having
glad
me.
to have you on.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
appreciate
being
it.
here, guys. And Katie Rucky is a reporter, staff writer generally, for the relatively new news operation in Minneapolis called Mint Press News. And I like the idea of Mint Press because they focus on social justice issues, where she specializes in health, criminal justice, and marijuana.
Yes.
I won't go through the
All
rest
those
of the
sexy
litany. Yeah,
topics.
okay.
And we also had with us Patrick McClellan, who was a witness during last session and told the committees how he suffers from mitochondrial myopathy. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct. Yep.
Which is a rare genetic muscular disorder that causes severe painful spasms, and he has found relief in using marijuana as a medical treatment. So thank you, Patrick, for being with us today and sharing your story.
Thank you for coming in, and as we promised last time out, we'll keep our eye on this, and not only is medical marijuana more effective than other remedies, that may be the problem in our corporate pharmaceutical culture, not so much fear of addiction. Its recreational use is clearly much safer than alcohol and nicotine. My friends in AA may not agree, but many simply cannot be objective about this. Once again, next week, we are going to be talking with the chat groups in Phillips neighborhood and the Backyard Initiative. Don't miss it.
And next Wednesday, July 10th, is the Community Connections Twin Cities Youth Empowerment Forum. Truth to Tell is a co-production of Civic Media Minnesota and KFAI. Links to audio archives of this and all of our past shows are on Truth to Tell's own website, truthtotell.org, as well as some past week's shows on kfai.org.
Thanks to our crew. Craig is on our, Stelmacher is on our cameras. We have Mark Kerner there as an engineer today, and Peter Hansen, as always, running around doing everything else in this place. So we thank them all.
And join us next week for another edition of Truth to Tell, 2 new editions of Truth to Tell next week. Until then, I'm Michelle Ali-Marati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll, and of course, back next week. We'll see you, as always. Please do take care of each other.